It was March break, and I was in my second to last year of high school, counting down the days to the new term. Back then, I'd always been up for an adventure, especially if it came with friends, a bit of thrill, and some quick cash. But that one night, that one job would change everything. One evening, my friend Hiro dropped by my place, looking like he'd just won the lottery. Easy 30,000 yen each, man. Just 2 days of work, he said, practically bouncing with excitement. His eyes had that familiar glint, the kind he got whenever he found a quick way to make money. This time, though, something felt different. Hiro went on to explain how he'd met a middle-aged guy at a pachinko parlor. The man seemed nice enough friendly, even from Hiro's description, and they'd struck up a conversation while playing. Hiro told him he needed to make some fast money to upgrade his computer, and the man had, as if on cue, offered him a job right there. It sounded like fate, but I wasn't so sure. The job itself sounded simple, even if it was a bit strange. All we had to do was clean up an old house somewhere in the Kansai region. Just a little dusting, maybe some junk to throw out, nothing too serious, Hiro assured me. The man had even mentioned that the house had running water and electricity, which made it sound less like a dump and more like some abandoned family property. I still wasn't convinced. I raised an eyebrow. Why would anyone pay that much for a simple cleanup job? Hiro just shrugged. Maybe he's just generous, or the house really needs the work. Besides, we need the cash, right? Think of it as an adventure. And my old computer's barely hanging on. He flashed me a grin, and I felt myself softening, the promise of easy money tugging at my curiosity. After a bit of back and forth, I finally agreed. Fine, I'm in, I said, trying to shake off the unease that gnawed at me. Maybe it was just nerves, after all. Cleaning up an old house didn't sound dangerous. But deep down, I knew there was something unsettling about the whole thing. The next morning, we received our Shinkansen tickets, along with detailed instructions on how to reach the house. It felt surreal, getting handed everything so easily. The man barely looked at us as he passed the tickets and instructions, disappearing into the crowd without a word. Hiro and I exchanged glances, but quickly laughed it off, joking about what we'd do with our money. The train ride was long, giving me too much time to think. I couldn't shake the strange feeling in my gut, a quiet sense of dread that only grew as we neared our destination. Hiro, though, was in high spirits, planning out what parts he'd buy for his computer. I tried to join in, but my mind kept drifting back to the guy who hired us and the weird look in his eyes. After hours on the Shinkansen and a winding taxi ride, we finally arrived. The place took my breath away, not in a good way. The house was enormous, practically a mansion, but it looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The garden around it was wild and overgrown, with vines crawling up the walls, twisting around broken statues. The once grand building had fallen into decay, and a heavy sense of gloom hung over it like a shroud. When we stepped out of the taxi, Hiro let out a low whistle. So, maybe it's a bit more than a quick cleanup, huh? I nodded, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Something about the place felt wrong, like it was holding on to secrets nobody should know. We walked up the creaking steps toward the front door, which looked ready to collapse. As we climbed, a thick layer of dust covered our shoes, and every step seemed to echo through the empty air. There was a stillness around us that felt unnatural, like the whole world had stopped moving. Off to the side, a stagnant pond lay in the corner of the yard, thick with algae and giving off a foul stench. I glanced at the surface, squinting as I thought I saw something ripple beneath it. My heart skipped a beat. Stop staring at it, dude. It's just a pond, Hiro said with a nervous laugh. But even he sounded a little unsure. We reached the door, and it groaned loudly as we pushed it open, as if reluctant to let us in. The smell of rot and mildew hit us instantly, thick and sour. I gagged, covering my nose, while Hiro waved his hand in front of his face, grimacing. The hallway beyond was dark, lit only by faint streaks of light slipping through the cracked windows. Dust covered everything, the wallpaper was peeling in huge strips. The chandeliers were rusted, and the floor tiles were cracked and uneven. It looked like nobody had set foot in here for decades. "Guess we're not the first to bail on this job," I muttered, trying to break the tension. Hiro chuckled, though his laugh sounded strained. "Hey, maybe that just means more for us." We stepped further inside, glancing into each room. Old, moldy furniture stood in ghostly silence, draped in dusty sheets. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Hiro noticed my unease and slapped my shoulder. "Come on, don't chicken out on me now." I forced a laugh, trying to shake off my nerves. We wandered deeper into the mansion, checking out the rooms and trying to get a feel for the place. Every step echoed, and the shadows seemed to twist and stretch, as if they were alive. I found myself glancing over my shoulder more often than I'd like to admit. We decided to start on the second floor. The first room we entered was filled with junk-broken furniture, old boxes, and layers upon layers of dust. We got to work, filling garbage bags and dusting off what we could. The silence between us grew heavier as the hours passed. I couldn't stop thinking about the man who hired us. Why hadn't he told us how bad this place was? And why pay us so much just to clean? When night fell, we locked up the house and went to grab dinner at a family restaurant nearby. I felt a weight lift as soon as we left the house. But as we finished up and headed back, a strange chill settled over me. The night was cold, but the feeling I had was something else, something dark. The mansion loomed ahead of us, its windows dark and hollow. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing in one of the windows, watching us approach. I blinked, and it was gone. I shook my head, telling myself it was just a trick of the shadows. When we stepped back inside, the air felt different. Where it had been stale and musty before, now it felt heavy, almost hostile. The shadows seemed darker, and the silence was so thick it felt like it was pressing down on us. "Did it always feel this creepy?" Hiro muttered, glancing around. I forced a laugh, though my voice shook. "Just our imagination, right?" We got back to work, but every noise seemed amplified, echoing off the walls. The house creaked and groaned, almost as if it was alive, and every shadow seemed to shift in the corner of my eye. The silence between Hiro and me grew thick as we worked, both of us too nervous to speak. Then, as I was bagging up some broken glass, I heard a soft whisper. I froze, holding my breath, and listened. There it was again, a faint, almost inaudible sound, like someone breathing close by. I looked at Hiro, but he was focused on his task, oblivious. I forced myself to shake it off, chalking it up to nerves. But the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. Every time I glanced up, I thought I saw a figure just at the edge of my vision, disappearing the moment I turned to look. My heart pounded in my chest, and my hands started to shake. "Hiro!" I whispered, barely able to keep the fear out of my voice. He looked up, frowning. "What? Do you feel like we're not alone?" Hiro laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Dude, you're freaking yourself out." But as the night wore on, even Hiro couldn't ignore it. The shadows grew thicker, the air colder, and every sound felt like a warning. By the time we finally left, we didn't speak, both of us shaken. I'd taken that job for a quick thrill and easy money, But what I left with was a memory of fear I'd never forget. We spread the futons out on the floor of the living room, choosing to sleep near the entrance. There was something about the idea of staying deeper in the house that felt wrong, as if the walls themselves were watching us. Even as we settled down, the silence pressed in on us like a heavy weight, an unnatural quiet that made the air feel thick. The kind of silence where every creak of the house, every distant sound, seemed amplified, as though the house was waiting for something. I lay there in the dark, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. I could hear Hero's breathing, steady but quick, his mind racing just like mine. We hadn't been there long enough to feel at ease. The house was too still, too empty, as if it held secrets that it didn't want us to know. Almost ready to drift off, Hero's voice suddenly sliced through the darkness. "Did you hear that?" I froze, half conscious, my mind groggy from the haze of sleep. "What?" I mumbled, barely able to keep my eyes open. "Listen." His voice was low, almost frantic. I was about to brush it off as just another one of those random noises houses make at night when I heard it too. A faint murmur. It wasn't a normal sound, not the creak of the house or the rustle of wind. It sounded like voices, distant, soft whispers, but there was no one else in the house. I turned my head slowly toward Hero, who was already staring at me, his wide eyes filled with fear. He didn't have to say anything. We both heard it whispers coming from somewhere deep inside the house, somewhere far down the hallway. It wasn't just the occasional noise, it was rhythmic, almost like a chant. My heart thudded painfully in my chest as I sat up. "What the hell?" Hero didn't answer. He just started creeping toward the hallway, his feet almost silent on the floor. I followed him, my breath shallow, every sense on high alert. The sound seemed to grow louder with each step, the whispers turning into something almost desperate, like the voices were calling to us. The hallway stretched out in front of us, shrouded in darkness. Our phone flashlights barely made a dent in the blackness ahead. Each step felt heavier, like we were walking through thick mud. The air felt colder the further we went, the whispers growing louder, until it felt like they were right behind us, breathing down our necks. When we reached the end of the hallway, there was a door. A simple door, but something about it didn't sit right. Hero's flashlight flickered as he turned it toward the door, and that's when I saw it. It was sealed tight, but the way it was boarded up made no sense. Thick wooden planks nailed across it, haphazardly put together, as if someone had rushed to keep whatever was inside from getting out. But why? The door was so tightly sealed that there was no way anyone could be inside. But the voices, they didn't stop. They continued, soft at first, but growing louder, until it felt like a crowd of people was whispering just beyond the door. It was maddening, the kind of sound that claws at your brain and refuses to let go. Hero and I exchanged a glance, both of us feeling the same thing. This was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. "What do we do?" Hero whispered, his voice shaky. I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to get out, to leave the house and never look back. But something kept me frozen in place. Something made me want to understand. I had to know what was behind that door. Hero's voice snapped me back to reality. "Let's check outside. Maybe we can see something from there." We both nodded, our legs unsteady as we made our way out of the house, our feet dragging, barely able to move fast enough. The night air was cold against my skin, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. We circled around the back of the house, to a small window that looked directly into the boarded-up room. The window was covered with planks, just like the door, but there were small gaps between them, gaps wide enough for us to peek through. I held up my phone's flashlight, shining it through one of the cracks. What I saw made my blood run cold. Inside the room, there was a low wooden table. On top of the table was a small box, no bigger than a shoebox, wrapped in heavy chains. The chains were rusted, but they were tightly wound around the box, and a series of rusted padlocks kept it sealed shut. Just looking at it sent a shiver through my whole body, as if the box held something that wasn't meant to be touched. My skin crawled, and I had this deep, gnawing feeling that whatever was inside was wrong. Hero's voice was barely audible as he leaned in closer, his breath visible in the cold night air. "What is that? Why is it chained up like that?" Before I could even attempt an answer, the silence shattered. A loud bang, like something or someone slamming into the window from the inside, made us both jump back, our hearts racing. The sound was deafening, a violent crash that shook the very foundation of the house. My flashlight flickered, casting wild, jerky beams of light across the dark window, but it only seemed to make the situation worse. Every shadow felt deeper, every creak of the house louder. Then, through one of the gaps in the planks, I saw something that froze me to the bone. Eyes, cold, empty, glowing faintly in the dark. They weren't human. They were too still, too unnatural. The eyes stared at us through the cracks, unblinking, unseeing until, one by one, more pairs of eyes appeared. Another set, then another, slowly, until there were 6 pairs of eyes, all glowing in the darkness, all focused on us. They stared at us, their intensity making my blood freeze in my veins. Hero and I didn't speak. We didn't need to. Without a word, we turned and ran. My legs felt like jelly as we stumbled back around the house and toward the main road, not daring to look back. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat thunderous in my ears, drowning out everything except the sound of our hurried footsteps. We finally reached the main road, gasping for breath, pale and shaken. I thought we were safe. I thought it was over. But just as we tried to calm ourselves, an old man appeared from nowhere, standing on the road in front of us. His eyes were sharp, his face creased with age, but his gaze was intense. "What are you two doing here?" he asked, his voice low and stern. We were too shaken to respond properly, our words coming out in a disjointed jumble. We told him about the eyes, the whispers, and the strange box. His expression darkened immediately, and he looked over his shoulder as if something was watching him too. "That house has a long history," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "You boys should leave. It's not safe here." Without another word, he led us to his home. His wife offered us hot tea and a warm place to rest. And for the first time in what felt like hours, we felt something like safety. But even then, sleep didn't come easy. The memory of those eyes, those unblinking, glowing eyes, haunted me. The whispers were still in my ears, echoing through my mind. The next morning, I decided to call the man who'd hired us, intending to quit. But as soon as I began explaining, he interrupted me. "Oh, so I guess it's still happening then," he said with a sigh. Then he hung up the phone, just like that. No apology, no explanation. Just an eerie finality to the conversation. As Hero and I boarded the train to leave town, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching us. A chill ran through me, and I glanced out the window, half expecting to see those glowing eyes staring back at me. I tried to convince myself it was just paranoia, but deep down, I knew the truth. Whatever had haunted that house had followed us. It wasn't over. Since that night, strange things have happened, whispers in empty rooms, shadows moving where there shouldn't be any. I've woken up to the sound of someone breathing next to me, only to find I'm alone. I keep seeing things out of the corner of my eye, dark figures lurking just beyond my vision. And the memory of those cold, glowing eyes continues to haunt me, a constant reminder that some things are better left undiscovered. Share your story with me in the comments below. And if you want to hear more terrifying tales, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. You never know when the next story will be about you. Stay safe out there, and remember, not everything you see is what it seems.